I've met hundreds of men and dads in the last 35 years of my life who are trying to not be their dad.
What was it like for you growing up? Was there something like in you that wanted to do this, just you personally? Like, did you, what was your upbringing like?
I think guys fear, and they don't want to admit it. They don't want to say out loud, I don't want to be a dad because I'm afraid I'm going to fail as a father, or I'm not sure I want to get married because I'm just afraid I'm going to get divorced. So the fear just becomes a driver and a governor that keeps us from taking risk. Fatherhood is one of, if not the most important societal topics for the continuation of a society of any kind ever.
Kent Evans, what's up, man?
Hey, Larry, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you. I just want to know, what time are you bringing your boys? And I'm bringing my boys to the baseball diamond because together we've got a team.
I like it. 5-4, so I have a slight voting advantage. So, yeah, I can't lose one senator out of that mix, but if I keep my block together, we could outvote you.
You probably could. Dude, 5 boys? Are you serious?
Yeah, which just means I have an amazing wife. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So let's start with some fun questions. How about that?
I can't wait.
What do your bathrooms look like on a normal basis?
I'm gonna go back to the fun wife. My wife gets more done in an hour than most people get done all day. She is efficient and thorough and disciplined, and so frankly, not bad. It doesn't look like a total frat house because she does not let it look like a frat house, and all my boys know that, and they learn as they go.
So, okay, so your wife, is she in charge of cleaning the bathrooms, or you got the boys doing
She's
this?
in charge of the boys cleaning the bathrooms, and they know better than to leave her with a lot of work to do.
Okay.
She runs a tight ship, and you can tell she's kind of wired to be a boy mom because, she doesn't take any crap from anybody, including me.
I hear you, man. Speaking of crap, do you want to hear a good boy story?
I'm concerned about the segue, but continue.
This is fresh off the media press, as in it's not even 12 hours old. So last night, it snowed about 15 inches here in St. Louis as you and I are recording. And it was awesome. We had a great time sledding and that kind of thing. Well, we got a hot tub because we make financial purchases through the lens of how will this connect us more? And a hot tub is great for that because you can't bring any electronics into it, and you're facing each other, so you're gonna have great conversations. So last night was our first time getting in the hot tub with snow everywhere, and it was magical, man. Like, we got this hot tub in the summertime, and I was like, I might sell this thing. This is not even fun. And then the winter hits, and you're like, oh, I like it now. But anyway, so my 11-year-old gets in the hot tub last night, and I don't know what happened, but it triggered something in he had to go to the bathroom, and that boy ran out of that hot tub, slipped on the snow, pooped himself, and then just continued to literally crap all over the bathroom. Wow. To the point where it literally looked like something like, have you ever just walked into a bathroom that a boy's been in, you're like, I just don't have an explanation of what happened in here. Like, if forensics came in here, they'd probably be like, we don't have a clue.
We don't know where it started. Well, now I can connect the dots back to why you asked me that question about the bathrooms with this being so at least he got out of the hot tub.
He did. Oh my God. Right. Cause we would have had to drain the whole thing.
Of course. Yeah. That's no joke.
Craziness. But so did you ever, let's rewind the tape here, going back 27 years before, when you all got married. Did you think you were going to have 5 boys?
No, in fact, April and I, when we first got married, in a few months at the time of recording this, we'll celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. So we've been married almost exactly 30 years.
Oh, okay. I had the years mixed up. Sorry about that.
And our oldest is 25 and our youngest is 9. So you do the math. We were married about 5 years before we started having kids. And early on, we were both, busy professionals, and kids were not even on the radar. We were like, nah, we're good without kids. And then at the 5-year mark, April got pregnant, and ever since then, we had 3 boys by birth and then 2 through international adoption. So, the first 3 happened for natural reasons. The next 2 happened because we decided to make them happen.
Wow. Oh, so I'm curious. I didn't know that. So you have 3 boys. How does it even come up in conversation of like, hey, I think, what do you think about this?
We had a lot of friends who adopted, number one. Number two, a friend of ours ran an adoption agency. Number three, there were several moments over a 1 or 2 year period where, just crazy little things happened where April and I decided, man, and this may come off wrong. I don't want to sound like we never have had any problems. I hope your listener doesn't think that. However, we did find ourselves at a place, 15 or so years ago where things are pretty stable. We had a pretty good job. We had lived pretty conservatively financially. We didn't overstretch ourselves. We had a great marriage. Like, we weren't at each other's throats. And we were like, there's a verse in the Bible, if your listeners are keen to that, that says, to him whom much is given, much is expected. And we felt like we've been given a lot. Just space and mental margin. And so we thought, let's look at adopting. And we just had a lot of friends in that water. So it was not very foreign in this part of the world.
Wow. So that's fascinating, man. How old was the youngest boy, biological boy, when you decided to adopt?
We had them at like a 12, 10, and 8. So we had that batch. And so our youngest was about 8 when we got a 9-month-old at home. So we went down like 7 years.
Wow. So what was the 3 of them? What was their, how did they feel about this? Were they excited?
Oh, pumped. Yeah. In fact, on our first trip, we adopted twice from the country of Ethiopia. And on the first trip over, we took our 3 older boys on this trip. So, man, it was magical. We still have such amazing family memories from the time where they used to let you like basically hang out with your would-be adopted child until the court system ran its way through. So we landed, they hand us this kid, and we have him for like a week and a half. And we took our boys. Yeah, it was awesome, man. Really cool.
That is really cool. So 5 boys, like, and the oldest is how old now?
Alex is 25.
25. And then go ahead and just go down the line.
25, 22, 20, I think, because they're both about to have birthday, and then 13 and 9.
Okay. Very cool. And are the older 3, are they out of the house?
Let's see. Alex is married, lives near Nashville, Tennessee. The second oldest, Jeremy, is in college and effectively out of the house because his job, he's going to be an architect. I don't know if he'll be back to Louisville, other than to visit. And then our 20-year-old goes to college locally but lives on campus. So, yeah, it's kind of like we're teetering on the edge of empty nesting where 2 and a half are out of the house and, 2 are still at home.
And so with the younger 2, like what's it like having like kind of like 3 out of the house?
Yeah.
Like going from 5 to 2 just seems like and the reason I ask is my wife and I, we've got 18 and 17. We only have a year and a half left until my 17-year-old is in college, and the other 2 will probably be out. We'll probably would go from 4 to 2.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like our dinner out bill has gotten a lot smaller.
Right.
That's fantastic. We can now go eat out for $50 instead of $150, which is crazy. And it's not Jeff Ruby's. We're not going to like super nice steakhouses here. We're going to like Chick-fil-A. And when you spend $80 at Chick-fil-A, there's a problem with the family budget. But man, we love our boys. We've loved being parents. Straight up, I love being a parent. I love being a dad. And it's not that it's easy. It's really, really hard some days and most days. However, I love it, man. I love it. And it's fun watching my older boys spend time with and pour into the younger boys. In fact, just as you and I were about to get on the call, I'm in geographically roughly the same spot as you are. I'm in Louisville, a few hours east of you. So we got the same snowstorm that you got. So there's 1.5 feet of snow out on the ground. And my 20-year-old was asking me where to go because he's going to go take the 13 and 9-year-old sledding. It's awesome when that starts to happen. And they spend time together without me. I love to watch my boys hang out.
That same for me, man. And it's funny you mentioned that because we've got our older 2. They're taking the younger 2 sledding here in just a little bit. So it's great. It's awesome. Yeah, man, I feel your pain on those out to dinner bills. Like I took my boys to Taco Bell, and just so you can kind of understand, like I don't eat Taco Bell. I haven't for probably 2 decades. I just won't eat it because it'll just go right through me. It just doesn't agree with me like it did when I was 16. And dude, we spent like $48
I know.
on 4 kids at Taco Bell, and the younger 2 kind of don't count because they only need like 3 tacos. But
I know.
I'm like, oh my God, I would have never spent this. Like, you were lucky you had a $5 bill in your hand. You'd be like, I can get 2 burritos with this bad boy.
I know. In college, man, I could eat a dinner on like $3 in college.
Right? Yeah, man. Well, let's dive right in. So you are the founder of, so is it Manhood Journey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about this, man. This is so needed right now, by the way.
Yeah, I think it helps put it in context age-wise. So I'm 54. When I was 40, some guys at our church said, "Hey, what can we do for fathers around here?" That was the basic starting question. And several of us got together and we decided to do a few different things, events, some studies, etc. And me and 2 other guys decided to write studies that dads could do with their sons. So really specific, very narrow first thing that we did. We created these studies, ran some tests, and we're all busy guys. One guy was CEO of a company. One guy was an executive at a school, high-ranking dude at a private school. I was flying back and forth to Europe, running a marketing operation for a big company, big global company. So we were all really busy guys, but we started creating content for dads to unpack the Bible with their kids. And we did that for a few years, and then it turned into, some books and some other things. And now you fast forward and, we'll have reached, by the time this show airs, we'll have reached roughly about 2 million dads worldwide on a shoestring budget, man, with a very small staff. It's been a crazy, wild ride, and I'm now full-time in the nonprofit.
Wow, man. How many people are on your team?
2 point something. And so what I mean by that is 2 of us are full-time, and we have about 10 contractors who do something like produce the podcast or crank out blog posts and that kind of thing. So we're a digital resource producer, and today we have 2 full-time people.
And you would have never thought in a million years you'd be doing this full-time, did you?
No. In fact, at the time we started, I had a really great job, very high-paying job, the most money I'd ever made. I was in my mid-40s, early 40s, flying back and forth to Paris and, Germany and London, working a fun corporate job, difficult, but enjoyable, and certainly paid well. But yeah, God just opened one door after the other, man. Before we found out, we're like, hey, I think we're supposed to do this full time. And back to the story I started earlier about my lovely wife, she's always been super supportive and like kind of had her hand in my back, like, go for it, do it, let's go. And so that's been a blast for us, even as a couple, to do it together.
That's great. And how did you know that this was going to work and you could go full time with it?
You say that in the past as if I'd have figured that out. I really have not. A friend of mine called a couple of years ago. I remember this so funny. His name's Jeff. He lives in Florida, and he was starting a nonprofit. And someone had committed a donation and then backed out. And he was calling me to kind of lament and gripe about it, which I didn't mind at all because I'd been in that same situation. And I said something to him that still is pretty true that I didn't plan on saying. And I go, Jeff, you know what? Manhood Journey has been going out of business in 6 months for 5 years. And I said it, and I was like, that's exactly true. That's economically true, 100%. So I can't see more than about 4, 5, 6 months in front of me in what we're doing economically. So, man, I have no idea. I might be calling you in 6 months looking for a job at the Dad Edge podcast because I don't know, man. I don't know. But I will say that the track that's been laid out in front of us has been laid out, kind of one strip at a time. And we're just trying to go at the right speed and not get going too fast where we outspeed our track and not go too slow where we're wasting an opportunity. And, you and I are recording this in January of 25, and we take it 1 month and one quarter at a time. And I don't plan much farther ahead than that.
Gotcha, man. So what is this whole thing? Like what is the big audacious goal with this?
I believe, and this would be something that you can not derail me. You can reroute me as you wish. It's your show. But I believe that fatherhood is one of, if not the most important societal topics for the continuation of a society of any kind ever. And that's both just looking back historically, but also from my particular faith tradition. I'm a Christian. Not that you got to be a Christian to agree with me, but if you are, it's real simple, because God said he's a father. Jesus called him a father over and over, 160 plus times in the New Testament. Jesus said, my father, my father, my father. I think fatherhood's important. I think it's critically important. And I don't think we have a motherlessness crisis in our country. No one says we have a motherless problem in our country. Everyone says we have a fatherless problem in our culture. And that's because, affluence tends to decrease father engagement, sadly. In fact, if you look nationally and both internationally, the U.S. Census Bureau would tell us that America has the largest per capita fatherhood absence rate of any nation in the world that has any level of industrialization. So when you look at that and you go, what's the correlation? The correlation is dads go chase other things. Career, fame, sex, porn, money, whatever they go chase. And when you live in an affluent society, it's easier to go find things to chase than just being an agrarian dude pulling the yoke behind the oxen, in a farming community. And so I think we've lost that. And I think, there's a lot of us out there trying to restore it. And I'm just one guy in that ocean of fatherhood stuff trying to help dads find their way.
Wow, man. That is that is awesome. What was it like for you growing up? Was there something like in you that wanted to do this, just you personally? Like did you, what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, great question. I had a really fortunate upbringing in many ways, in that I had a mom and a dad, both engaged. They divorced when I was 17 or 18. And that was traumatic for me. I wouldn't have called it trauma then, but man, it just, the whole apple cart of my life got completely upended. And I remember, Larry, going to see a counselor when I was 17 or 18. And I was really frustrated about where my mom and dad were, and I had a lot of axes to grind, and I was bitter and angry. And he said something to me. I'm 54, so this would have been, over 30-something years ago, almost 40 years ago. We're getting there, 37 years ago. He said, Kent, I get the sense you don't want to end up where your parents are, which was an understatement. Like, yeah, no duh, man. His name was Weldon. And I said, yeah, Weldon, exactly. And he goes, well, I want to help you. And I said, great, you're the counselor. That's your job. And he said, you can't become the unsomething. And I understood it mostly. I understood what he was trying to say, but I asked him to unpack it. And he goes, look, your brain doesn't know, and this is pre all the brain research we have now, which would all back him up. He was ahead of his time. He just goes, look, your brain doesn't know what to do with, I sure won't fill in the blank. I won't be an astronaut. I won't be poor. I won't be on Skid Row, whatever you put in that category. He said, you can't become the unsomething. And I've met hundreds of men and dads in the last 35 years of my life who are trying to not be their dad. That is so destructive. And that is so counterproductive. And then Weldon said the second thing, which I just still haven't forgotten. It's still ringing in my ears almost 40 years later. He goes, hey man, life has a crazy way of turning you into whatever you hate. And I'm going to encourage you. So I said, okay, let's just say I buy this. I'm like 17 or 18. What do I do? And he goes, get around men who have what you want. Figure it out. He goes, like an FBI sketch artist, build a composite picture of who you want to be when you grow up from other people. And so what's interesting is, Larry, I had a lot to learn from my dad, who, we had our issues with the whole breakup of the marriage, but he volunteered, he made money, he fixed our cars. Like, he was an engaged dad on a number of levels. And so I had a lot to learn from him. And his example was not entirely problematic for me. But then there were other areas, spirituality, how to love a wife till you die, how to stay pure, those things. I had to learn those from other men. And that just set me on a course where I've been learning from other men now for 35 plus years. And that's changed my entire life.
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. What was it? What's your relationship with your mom and dad like now? Are they still with us?
Yeah, both are. My mom is 83. My dad is 86. My dad lives in Florida. He got remarried to an amazing lady. I love Denise, so I have a really good relationship with my dad and with Denise. In fact, last year we went down and spent some time with them. Went to church with them, which I don't remember the last time I'd stepped into church with my dad. Crazy whole just God thing. My mom lives a mile from me. She comes over, watches the kids. I see my mom a lot. Just saw her yesterday at church again. She's an amazing lady. So I have a good relationship with my mom and my dad, though they've been separate now for more than 30 years. And it has been a lot of personal growth for me to get past some of my frustration and anger about where they ended up. But frankly, man, the power of other mentors, the power of God's word, the Holy Spirit, my amazing wife. My wife's been tremendous for 30 years now. I've been really, really fortunate in my adult life.
Wow, man. And you're going to celebrate 30 years of marriage. And what is it? And your wife's name is what again?
April, just like
April.
the month.
Okay. So how is it that you and April have navigated almost 30 years together? Like, what do you really, really lean your hat? What do you hang your hat on with that?
I would say maybe two or three things. Number one, she herself has a very vibrant and active faith. She prays, she reads the Bible. Like, she is a solid, rugged, grounded woman. Amazing, like really. And I don't say that like in case she listens to this show and I get some brownie points for propping her up. She's not really a words of affirmation gal anyway, so she could care less. So that's not her love language. But I'm super fortunate in just the when I pray for her, I'm like, God, thank you for giving me a faithful, diligent, hardworking, proactive, energetic. She's an amazing woman. So part one is marry a great woman. Like step one, marry a great woman. Step two, I have, because of what Weldon told me when I was in my late teens, I occasionally find a lot of guys are kind of isolated. They're living life alone. That's never been my problem. I've had friends for 2-3 decades. And not because I'm such a great friend, just I've been really fortunate. I've been very fortunate. Keeping good, worthy examples around you for me has been really great. I could reach out and text probably 15 guys right now who've been married for 25 years or longer that I personally know that know my situation. So like I'm surrounded by dudes who are setting a good example. So a lot of running buddies, a lot of cohesion. And then third for me is I would say I have historically cared more about, well, let me say it two ways. I used to care a lot more about what people think about me. And I cared a lot about how people perceived me. I've cared less and less about that as the decades have gone on. Not that I just throw it overboard. I don't want to show up without a shirt on. Like I'm not trying to throw my individuality in everybody's face, but I care less and less what people think about me, and I care more and more about my character. I'm trying to work on that. I was listening to a song the other day, The War Inside by Switchfoot. Love that song. And it just says, there ain't no killer like pride. There ain't no killer like I. and it goes on and it says, I am the war inside. I am the battle line. And it goes on, but that song to me is a picture of, I know who my enemy is. My enemy is not my wife. My enemy is not my 5 kids. My enemy is not my budget. My enemy is not whoever's in the White House. My enemy is not the culture. My enemy is Ken Evans. And when I can keep that in view, I make better decisions.
Man, that is so cool. There's a ton there. And you talk about what are these 4 tactics, correct?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened, man. And I know you've done this a lot, maybe even a lot more than I have, but you'll be up speaking in front of a group. And you'll have a lot of prepared comments, and you've worked on your talk and you care and, you're diligent. You showed up ready to go. And then you'll say something off the cuff that was not planned, that may or may not be the best thing you said that whole time, that whole 30 minutes or that whole weekend. So I was at an event in Michigan a few years ago, and I had done hours of prep, man. I mean, like custom slides, the whole bit. I was super deep into these 4 sessions I led at a men's retreat. And at the very end, a guy in the room, one of the leaders, said, hey, can we do Q&A? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. And there was like 150, 160 people at this event. And so I said, okay, Q&A, ready, go. And the first question, this guy out of the audience raised his hand. I said, yeah. And he goes, what do you do when you feel like you're going backwards? And I just thought, what a great question. What a great question. And I had not at all planned on saying something. And out of my mouth, I just said, before I tell you what you do, can I tell you what you don't do? And he goes, sure. And I said, I'm 50, I'm in my mid 50s, so just so people can date me. So when I was in my 20s and I watched baseball all the time on TV, the guy I watched all the time was Derek Jeter. I loved watching Derek Jeter play baseball. A, because he's amazing, but B, I wasn't a big Yankees fan, but he was just a gamer, man. Like he seemed to have a good attitude. When he struck out, he just walked back to the dugout. You know, like he just, I don't know. There's something about the way he played the game was one of my favorite people to watch. So I said to this guy in the audience, I said, hey man, what did Derek Jeter do when he made an error? And I didn't quite know where this was going, but I thought I knew where this was going. It was off the cuff. And I said, you know what he did? He tore off his jersey. He threw his hat down. He threw his glove down. And like a baby, he stomped back to the dugout. And he just quit. And of course, they're all laughing because that's not what he did. And I said, however, that's what you do. That's what I do. When we make mistakes as men, we bench ourselves. And as we're walking off the field, there's our wife, there's our kids sitting in the stands wishing we would stay in the game. But we walk off the field because we can't handle making an error. And it was like, bro, I don't know where this came from. Seriously, God inspired, I don't know. But all I'm saying is I hadn't planned on saying it. It was not in my notes. It was a response to his question. When I'm done talking to an event of that size, 150 guys, it's like roaches when the lights come on. They just scatter. No one says anything. There's no affirmation. There's no nice job. They just leave. One guy might tell me about the mistake I made or the Bible verse I quoted incorrectly. Like, you get nothing from guys. I don't. Maybe you get a ton. In the back of the room, bro, there was a line of like 15 guys who wanted to tell me how they had benched themselves.
Wow.
And I was like, what? So I held on to that line, don't bench yourself. And that was the book I released in August where I talked about 4 reasons we tend to bench ourselves and 4 ways we get back in the game if we have benched ourselves. And it came out of a throwaway line at a conference doing Q&A.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's go through them.
Yeah, real fast. Here's 4 ways. And this is not the only 4. There's probably 400, but the 4 big ways that I tend to bench myself. Number 1 is fear. Number 2 is shame. Number 3 is criticism. And number 4 is impatience. And here's a real quick sketch on each of them. Fear, obvious. You're afraid you may not be able to make it, so you just don't even play the game. A lot of guys who, husbands, dads, we don't know what we're doing, so we're afraid of it. Number 2, shame. You try, but you fail. And you feel like your mistakes are up on the Jumbotron, just like, an NFL guy who didn't make the catch. Everything looks easier in slow motion, but you feel shame. Number 3, criticism. It's just withering. You're fielding these arrows from people all the time, especially if you're on social media. You get a lot of criticism and it just wears you down. So you're like, to heck with it. So you just go to the bench. And 4th, impatience. You've tried and tried and tried and the results aren't there. So you're like, screw it. I'm just going to give up because you just haven't seen the results that you want. And then there's kind of a 4-step process I like to take guys through for how to get out. But fear, shame, criticism, and impatience are ways I see men and me, Kent. These are the enemies that I have, the things that tempt me to want to get out of the game.
Do you think any one of those 4 are a more powerful lever than the others?
Yeah, that's why I started with fear.
Okay.
When I was 16, I was a decent baseball player. Like rec league, I'd bat 300 and get on base a lot, but I was not going anywhere baseball-wise. But the average speed of a kid I would bat against when I was in my teens was about 65, 70 miles an hour. If you could hit a 70-mile-an-hour pitch, you were a pretty good batter. One summer, I played against a guy named Steve Dixon, and Steve ended up kind of flaming out, but he could have had a D1 college career. But he could throw 85 miles an hour. And when you're used to hitting a 70-mile-an-hour pitch, an 85-mile-an-hour pitch, it looks like a ping pong ball. Like you don't even see it. It's like he releases it and you hear the catcher and the ump says strike and you're like, what happened? So I remember, man, being honestly, legitimately afraid to bat against him. Because not only could he throw the ball harder than I could hit it, he didn't have superior control. So every now and then a ball would go behind you, like behind you, the batter. I don't mean like near you. I mean 2 feet, and you're like, this guy's going to kill me. And so I just remember when you go from like speed X to speed more than X, just fear. You know, it's like when the guy goes from being single to being married, or goes from being with his wife and no kids to you start having kids, or you have a job where you're one of the line managers and then you get promoted and you're the boss. Or you had a budget of, $1 million budget, and then you take over a division with a $20 million budget. That gap often creates fear. And so we're like, forget it. I'm too afraid to even get in the game. And I think that's a big one, man. I think guys fear, and they don't want to admit it. They don't want to say out loud, I don't want to be a dad because I'm afraid I'm going to fail as a father, or I'm not sure I want to get married because I'm just afraid I'm going to get divorced. So the fear just becomes a driver and a governor that keeps us from taking risk.
Whew. Yeah, I would agree with that. And, I think the shame thing is a pretty powerful thing, because I think have you ever heard of the term, the shame loop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I invented it. No, I'm just kidding.
Did you invent it? Yeah,
I've been in it. I've been in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we feel shame for something we did. Then we go do something to numb it, which is usually a shameful activity. And then we're back to the shame thing again. We just never leave it. It just sort of perpetuates on its own. But I can agree with that. When it comes to, let's talk about shame for a second. I think that's one of the hardest things for a guy to recover from. Because it's exactly like, I love your analogy of the Jumbotron. Yeah. Because it's like, if we screwed up, it's like, oh, wow, like, look at that. They just keep replaying it over and over. Like, laces out. I told them laces out. Like, look at that. You know what I mean? You got the joke.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But yeah.
I think for me, what's interesting, in almost like a clinical sense about shame is, not that I'm a doctor. I don't mean that in that way it sounded. But like, if you look at shame, not as something personal, if you just kind of try to look at it like you're auditing some financials, or you're looking at a game film of another team play, not you, just another team. When you look at shame, the question we've got to ask ourselves is, where do we receive and get our identity? Because if we understand that, then shame loses a ton of power. Uses a ton of power over us. So, and here's what I mean. Right now, when you and I are recording this, we got I just went to a basketball game a week ago and saw the Pacers play the Milwaukee Bucks. And so one of the best players in the modern era, Giannis Antetokounmpo was playing. And watching him play is a blast. Like 2 steps from the foul line, he's dunking the ball. He's a blast to watch live. I had never seen him live. First time I've ever seen him live. I'm 100% confident that Giannis watches game film. 100% confident. And or somebody on that team watches the game film for him and gives him the debrief. But a quarterback on the sidelines, a Tom Brady, anybody who wants to get better at their craft is going to watch the results of them plying their craft. And what they can separate is they can separate their identity from their performance. And they don't see those as the same thing. I remember at the end of his career, I think the last game Ben Roethlisberger played at Pittsburgh, he threw 3 or 4 interceptions, lost to the Cleveland Browns. Like, it was a very bad way to end a football career that was such a great football career. I know for a fact he does not see that game as the sum total of his professional career, and he sure doesn't see that game as who he is as a person. And what I find with shame, man, is so many guys have placed their identity in being a husband, or being a dad, or being a rich person, or being a good skier or a good golfer, or whatever they put their identity in. And when they fail at the thing, they take it personally. Instead of looking at game film and going, man, that was a bad decision. I should have seen that cornerback coming, and I should have thrown that ball to a different place, or I should have dumped that out of bounds. Yeah, I'll make a better decision next time. Instead, they just go, I'm a failure. I'm a loser. And that's identity language. That's language of identity, and that does not belong in the conversation about performance.
I think that's a tough one for us guys too, because I think when you're in that shame loop, it's very hard to zoom out. You know, like I look at your analogy of game film, like zooming out from the situation, almost being able to see it from a third person perspective of like, let me debrief here. Let me look at this situation objectively and let me see what happened. Right. But when you're in that shame loop, I think we're usually just beating ourselves down so relentlessly that the TV to watch the game film is not even in the same room, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I remember when I was first doing more, I was in a sales job, and I was being trained by a guy who was a really great public speaker. And he did like this week-long, very intensive public speaking course. And this is, you want to date myself. Oh my goodness. Some guy's going to turn off the podcast the minute I say this, because he'll be like, who is this old guy? But his name was Charles Riley. And Charles literally had, Larry, VHS tapes. And I know some of you are going to have to go to ChatGPT to find out even what that is. But he had VHS tapes, and he put each of the students' names on a tape. And then throughout the week, you would give about 10, 11 talks that whole week. And he would put your tape in, record you, and then, keep switching them out. Larry's up next, Tom's up next, Kent's up next. So you went home with this VHS tape. And he said, hey, look, losers don't watch themselves on video. Winners watch themselves on video. And you're going to watch yourself on video, and you're going to hate it. Your voice is going to sound awful. Your face is going to look stupid. Your hair is going to look out of place. But here's what you got to understand. If you want to win at communication, you got to see yourself like other people see you. And the closest you'll ever get is video. And bro, it was amazing. I was so good. And honestly, I didn't, at the time, I didn't connect it. But he helped me be a better husband. He helped me be a better dad. Because what he taught me was watching my own game film is really valuable and really painful. And so once you know that, it's not as bad. It's not as bad, even though I still hate seeing myself on video. Even now, I don't enjoy watching myself on video. But I know I've got to do that if I'm going to want to improve in this area. And so as a dad, as a husband, my wife occasionally will help me play some game film so that I can get better.
I love that, man. How does she do that?
While I was writing this book, this is 9 months ago, while I was writing the book, one night we're going to bed, and April says, hey, I got to tell you something you're not going to want to hear. Oh boy,
right before bed.
Fantastic. And here's the thing, man. Like, if you're a wife sneaking in to the Larry Hagner Dad Edge podcast, and you're trying to get some intel on your husband, that is brilliant. Like, I could go through a whole list, but briefly. Number 1, we were alone. Number 2, she waited for the thing to die down. Hang with me. Number 3, she prepped me. It's like, this is going to sting a little. So like, just, it's a master class in how to get your husband to listen to you. But set that aside for a second. And she goes, I want to tell you something you're not going to want to hear. And I said, great, lay it on me. And she goes, earlier today, you were hustling out of the house. You were rushing. And your 13-year-old son, 12 at the time, one of the iPads you used for your ministry fell out, probably broke. He shoved it back in the car. And I was like, wow, big deal. It's a broken iPad. We'll go get another one. She goes, that's not the part you're not going to want to hear. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's going to get worse. And I said, all right, what's the part I'm not going to want to hear? She goes, you were so mad at Titus, your 9-year-old, and you were yelling at him to get in the car. Timothy didn't want to tell you about the iPad breaking because he was afraid of how you would react. So he wanted me to tell you instead. Okay, so listen, man. You know what that's called as a father? Failure. Failure. With an F. And here's what's crazy. It's actually failure over time. It's repeated failure. Because clearly I had set a pattern in my home. Better not tell dad when he's already on tilt. All I could do, Larry, was go, That sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I failed. And the next morning, I go to my son and I go, hey, man, I got 2 things I got to tell you. Number 1, I am sorry for yesterday and that you felt like I was unsafe and you could not tell me what happened. And number 2, evidently, that wasn't my first rodeo, and I've set a pattern around here that Dad can't be approached with tough news when he's in a hurry. I am sorry, and I have failed you, and I'm going to try to do better in the future. So for me, my wife playing that game film is critical to me learning how to grow as a dad. And then and you even talked about this on one of your Fatherhood Fridays recently, the capacity to come back to your kids and say, hey, man, I blew it. That was a failure. And it's not because of what you did. It's not because you did it. There's no finger pointed at anybody but Ken Evans. I failed as a father, and I'm going to try to do better in the future. And she helps me play that game film. And she doesn't play it every night. This ain't like a nighttime thing. She knows better than that, but she will play it on occasion, and she knows I want to grow, and she's learned how to handle me pretty well.
Man, so is it tough actually hearing that from all people, your wife? Like, would it have been easier to hear from somebody else, or do you guys you and April, do you guys have the relationship where you're like, the reason I ask this question is because I think there are some relationships out there, some marriages out there that nobody likes that kind of news, but you can be like, you know what, if it's like, I welcome it. Like it's better if I know than if I don't.
Yeah.
And then there are times where, like, I mean, I'll be very honest. My wife and I, like, we're going through a season right now of just really, really, like, it's crazy busy. I've never been this busy in 18 years of parenting as I am right now. And so like my wife and I, we've got 4 boys right now in very demanding activities. And the interesting thing is this, in years past, fall time, it's my older 2. So I've got a kid who's in marching band, a kid who's in football, and it's both the same school. So Friday nights, it's easy to see both, right? And then the springtime, my little guys were always doing like soccer. So it was like, okay, we got 2 in the fall, we got 2 in the spring. Yeah. This year, what they decided to do is my little guys decided to play fall sports. So like they're doing, we got 2 football players now, 1 hockey player, now 1 wrestler, a band kid. Now my little guy, one of my little guys does choir, and my other little guy does fitness before school, so choir and fitness. And they all wanted to do this stuff. And so lately my wife and I have been like ships passing in the night, and it's been tough. Still got a good relationship, everything's okay, but we're not as connected as we used to be, which has caused stress, right? Because one thing that we pride ourselves on is having a super close marriage, and which we do. But right now, I would say it's very hard to connect when you're like seeing each other out the door. Like, hey, I'll go to hockey if you go to wrestling. Okay, I'll do wrestling, you do hockey, like that kind of thing. And so anyway, it's caused some strife, and it's caused some frustration, and it's caused more strife and frustration on my part. So like how it's shown up is that lately I've been more irritable. Like I can totally relate to your story there, and which is the opposite of what I want to be. And so when my wife told me this, and I asked her for it, I was like, hey, share with me some game film, right? I didn't say that, by the way, but that's what she did. And she's like, and she gave me some really critical feedback, but she did it in a very loving way. She did it almost like as like, hey, I'm your friend. I'm like trying to, and you asked, and I'm going to tell you because I care. And she told me, and I got to tell you, it was like, it's one thing to get the information, and it's a good thing to hear from my wife. It's also a hard thing to hear from my wife because I'm like, damn, man, that's like my wife. That's like my girlfriend. It's like my woman, it's like, that's the one I want to be on point with. And when she sees this stuff too, it's hard. So like, back to the question, like hearing it from your wife.
Well, what I think's interesting, and I can relate on a number of levels, and I'm sure that a guy listening, probably thousands of guys listening, can relate to that busyness, that ships passing in the night, which, we got to ask ourselves in the grand scheme, sometimes we got to pull something back. Maybe we've stretched it a little too wide. Who knows? But you live and you breathe in, you breathe out. There may be times when, you go, whew. Like for us, it's usually the fall. I coach our kids in soccer and stuff, and we just know from August to mid-October, there's going to be very little bandwidth. But we go in kind of eyes wide open, and we're not surprised when September is crazy. Every now and then it'll be like September, and we're about to, claw each other's eyes out, and I'm like, April, it's September. We do this every year. This should not be surprising. So some of it is, all right, for some dad listening, he may have overextended, and no one can survive under the weight of his calendar. Okay, however, set that aside. Who do you want to be the closest to on planet Earth? And for me, I want that to be my wife, not my Wednesday afternoon accountability group that we pray with on Zoom. Love those guys. Odds are none of the four of them will be at my funeral. Odds are. Even so, I love my wife a billion times more than any one of those four guys. And they're great guys. Even my kids. One time one of my older sons said to me when he was 8 or 9, he said, you love mom more than you love us, don't you? And I said, yes, absolutely. Any other questions? Now, again, I'm not going to get into the theology of who we love the most. However, my boys know they are temporary residents on loan to me from God. I will steward them until such time as I kick them out of my house, in which case they got to live on their own. And I will be left here, Lord willing, with an alive wife that we will go, So they know my relationship with April. And so here's the deal, man. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. The people I most want critical feedback from are the people who are closest to me. Number one, because I trust their motive. I know they're not just trying to catch me. It's not a gotcha. Secondly, they have the opportunity to see me at my worst. And not to offend a guy listening, but just, let me just say something that you might get a little hate mail over. You can give my email address out if you want. A lot of guys try to be real honest Friday mornings at 6:30 with their accountability group, but their accountability group didn't see them be a butthole on Wednesday night. And they'll conveniently forget that. They'll be like, oh, my wife's always on my case, or my 16-year-old kid won't listen to me. Yeah, because when your 16-year-old kid walks in the door, you start haranguing them with insinuation and attack language, and then you want to come to your Friday morning group and go, oh, 16-year-olds, they won't listen. Well, your accountability group's at a bit of a deficit. They got to take your word for it. But your word is skewed, and your word is viewed through the lens of your best intentions. You know who can see through all that? Your wife. She catches you in real time, for good and for bad. And so, look, for me, yes, fully on board with you, bro. I don't want my wife pointing out something to me every hour or two. And there are times, Larry, when I told my wife, I'm like, hey, water's high a bit right now. It's high at work. It's high personally. I got this thing going on. Do me a favor. I really do want critical feedback, but not today. Not today. Unless I am going to endanger our children. Save it. Just seriously, write it down, save it. I've done that. Probably 30 times. I've told my wife, look, I need 48 hours. Now's not the time. Now's not the time. And she's always honored that, been very respectful of that. But I'm with you, bro. I don't like to hear it from my wife, but at the same time, man, faithful are the wounds of a friend. I know she loves me. I know she's got my back. And I know that if I hear her out, I become a better version of myself, and our marriage is better. So in some ways, I may sound like I'm just a really advanced guy who loves feedback. I'm probably just selfish. And what I want is I want a better marriage because I want better time at home. And I know if I listen well, I'm going to get what I want. So this is probably from a heart of selfishness in total, if I'm completely honest. But still, if I hear her out and I process it and I go, man, that is great feedback. I need to do better at that. All right, what's for dinner? And just move on. I know I've made a deposit in my marital bank account, and that's a good thing.
I think it is good because, our wives have a front row seat. They know us better than anybody, and I never thought about that 48-hour thing or like, hey, can you wait on it or can you sit on it for a minute? The feedback that I got this past weekend, I wish I would have interviewed you on Friday instead of Monday because I'd probably been like, can you tell me Monday? Because right now I'm just really enjoying our date. And she gave me this feedback, and I literally had to step away from, and I'll tell you what the feedback was. I'll tell you and all the audience, I'm an open book. All my dirty laundry's out there. I think because my marriage is insanely important to me. I don't know, man. Like that's one thing that like I really stake my flag in, and I'm like, man, we've got like this part of our life, man, it's good, and it's really good. And because it's good, I honestly think because I have a good marriage, like I'm a better father because of it, and I'm a better producer in my business because of it. I'm just a better human being with my wife, you know, aligned and with me, right? And so is she.
Absolutely.
So when that relationship gets a little off kilter, what I've noticed is everything gets a little off kilter. So like if we're not connected, I've noticed that I have less patience with my kids. I noticed that I am not as productive as at work. You know, I tend to not make really great decisions, and that kind of eats away. And then what happens is how it shows up is my patience is thin, and then I get a little trigger happy, little bit quicker to anger with my kids, which doesn't make her feel great at all. So the feedback was like almost every weekend for the past month and a half, I've seen you like argue with the kids or lose your crap on the kids. And the kids are asking me like, is dad going to be angry this weekend? And dude, that killed me.
Right.
And it was so funny. We went out on this date, and it came on the exact same day as a lot of challenges came at me that day. I got in an argument with someone that I work with. I got in an argument with my oldest son because he told me he was going to babysit while I took his mom out, who desperately needed a break. And then the last hour, he's like, I think I want to go hang out with my girlfriend. And I'm like, boy, you do not do this now. I was like, bro, like I've got dinner reservations. You know how bad me and your mom need a break. I'm going to kill you right now. And then, so that's the energy I went to dinner with. And then my wife laid that on me. And I literally like normally when I get feedback, I'm like, I appreciate you telling me that. Thank you. Yeah. I looked at my wife and I go, I need to go to the bathroom. And she looked at me kind of odd, and I'm like, and that was my way of like, I need to step away from this because I am about ready to kill somebody right now. Cause it just had been so much that day.
Yeah.
And then I went to the bathroom, came back, and she goes, did you really have to go to the bathroom? I said, yeah. She goes, did you have to go to the bathroom and cool down? I'm like, yes. She goes, which one did you have to do more of? I was like, the latter. And
that's great.
I told her, I was like, I'm not mad at you. I wasn't. I was like, I'm not mad at you. I was like, in fact, what you told me is 1,000% true. It just so happened it was timed on a day where I got punched in the face over and over again, and I needed a breather. And to be honest, if she would have asked me, hey, I got some feedback for you, I'd be like, you know what? Can we talk about it tomorrow morning? I just want to like enjoy the evening with you. I think I would have done that. I didn't even think of that. That's a great idea.
Well, you know, you were self-aware enough to know that your best play was to go take 5 minutes and not respond in the moment. I had a friend named Greg who told me years ago, probably 10 years ago now, he goes, Kent, you're going to be a much better leader when you learn how to respond and not react. Mm-hmm. And man, that was just great language for me. And I've held on to that. And I've tried to get better and better, man. I'm an extrovert. I'm kind of mouthy. I think fast. And so that's a dangerous combination. And so often my mouth gets me into trouble. And so kudos for you to at least take the 5-minute break, because you probably did a lot less damage than if you just started right in.
I did. My hands were really clean because I think I washed them for like 4 minutes. I don't know, I was just like, I'm in the mirror.
Some
like,
other guy was in the bathroom looking at you going, dude, what's up with this guy?
I just look over and be like, do you know how many germs are in this place?
And then she said, and he's like, hey, man, hey, it's...
I just want to go to the bathroom, sir.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, dude, that is so true. Can we segue into some of these books you've written?
Let's go, man. Whatever you want to talk about.
So you've talked about this latest book that you wrote, which I think is absolute gold. But dude, you've written some other books here like that I think are amazing. So like you've written, your first book was Wise Guys, Unlocking the Hidden Wisdom from Men Around You, which I think is completely and 100% appropriate for everything you just talked about, which is good men in your corner, right? And not just the guys who are going to like, dude, you're good. No worries. Yeah. Like you're probably you're talking about the men that want better for you, who challenge you, that kind of thing. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And guys who, just on that topic, I'd love to help a guy or a dad. I don't tend to go looking for what I would call whole life mentors. It's not that I'm not open to that. It's just that I tend to look for guys who are gifted in areas And then that's the area I try to learn from, right? It's Ralph Waldo Emerson, and then Dale Carnegie put it in How to Win Friends. Every man I meet is in some way my superior. And in that, I endeavor to learn. And so I remember one time I was at lunch with a guy named Greg. He'd written 10 books, way advanced from me from an author standpoint, way far down the road. And I was learning from him author stuff. And then the topic switched to adoption. And all of a sudden, he'd never adopted. We've adopted twice. Then I became a bit of the mentor, and he was the protege. And I just remember learning. I just try to get around dudes who have things I don't. And guess what? That's everybody. Everybody I meet knows something I don't. And in about 10 minutes at a cocktail party, I'm going to find that out. And that's what I'm going to be asking them about as long as they'll listen.
Very cool. Yeah, I same way, man. Like, you come across me as a very curious person, aren't you?
Hyper. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
too curious almost.
Ask a lot of questions type thing.
Love it. Yeah. In fact, on your last Friday fatherhood thing, you talked about asking better questions. Mm-hmm. And honestly, just because I'm normally speaking to a church audience, when guys say, what are the 2 things you tell every dad? And I'm like, read your Bible more often. Part 1. Part 2, ask better questions. That's always my advice to dads.
I love that, man. What about bring your hammer? 28 tools dads can grab from the book of Nehemiah.
Yeah. If you're a Bible student, Nehemiah was this guy who was a cupbearer to the king. So he worked in this very secular environment. And then people from Jerusalem came back and told him the walls had been down for a long time. And Nehemiah was a Jew and wanted to go back and help. So he decided to go back and rebuild the wall. Then he governs the city of Jerusalem for a decade or more. Nehemiah is like this prototype in the Old Testament of a leader, a no-nonsense guy, a guy who had a really soft heart. He prayed, he cried, he wept, he asked, he expressed his needs. You know, he was very soft in terms of his sensitivity, but then he also grabbed people by the hair, yanked them out of the temple, told them he's going to kick their butt if they come back on the Sabbath, that kind of thing. So he was like a man's man in the Old Testament. Ironically, we don't see that he was a dad. We don't see him married. We don't see anything like that, at least not in recorded history. And so I was reading the book of Nehemiah one year, and a bunch of lessons jumped off the page, and we put them together just for dads, you know, how to earnestly seek counsel, how to plan for things, how to divide up work, how to be honest about your situation. All these lessons are super easy to grab from this guy, Nehemiah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I haven't read that book. I've read the Old Testament here and there, but there are certain books I haven't read. I haven't read that one yet. That's fascinating though. Can you mention a couple other things? I know there's 28 tools in there, but just maybe some ones that might be really meaningful.
Here's one that I think applies, especially if you're a dad with, like, say, teenage kids, in your case. Nehemiah was working in this palace, and who comes to visit him but his brother? And he says, hey, bro, how are things back home? And his brother says, terrible. The wall's broken down. We're at risk. This is awful. And we can't really totally appreciate that in our modern era. We're like, wall broken down. What, you got a fence problem? You get some more boards, you put it back up. No. Old cities, right? That was their fortification. That was their pride. That was their self-defense, frankly. And so the wall being broken down was a massive deal. Here's what Nehemiah does first. When he hears this news, he confesses his own sin. And you're like, what in the world? Like, I mean, that is the oddest place to start. Secondly, he prays. Okay, so you got a 14-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid. They come home and they say, oh, that coach doesn't give me enough playing time, or that work at school, or that teacher's just out to get me. Is your first reaction as a dad to consider your own sin in this equation? I mean, almost no dad can do that. Correct. And is your second reaction to pray for wisdom? So the reason I bring that particular one up is because if you read the book of Nehemiah, he rebuilds the wall in 56 days. He's a butt kicker. He's a planner. He's a strategist. He's a builder. He's armed. He's dangerous. He's kind of like this macho guy. However, his default setting was to be reliant on other people and God. He needed lumber from the king. So he asked Artaxerxes for time off and for some lumber and all this stuff. So Nehemiah is a very strategic individual, very strategic. But his starting point was, man, I got a problem. And before I get into fixing this problem, I'm going to take a quick inventory of who's looking back at me in the mirror, and I'm going to ask for some help. And man, how would we do better as dads if our 16-year-old came home with his relational problem du jour and our gut reaction was, hey, let's think about this for a second? Or is it, I'll call their dad right now. I'll give that teacher a piece of my mind. All right, let's back it up. And that's for me why Nehemiah is so fascinating, because he was this cool blend of aggressive and macho, but he was also this cool blend of soft and thoughtful and very strategic and inward focused.
So he would pause, is what you're saying. And
Crazy.
Yeah.
In many, many books of the Bible, we don't see real clear timelines. It's like, this happened, then that happened, that happened. You don't always see how much time is in between. In the first chapter of Nehemiah, you get a month of the year in the Hebrew calendar. In the second chapter, you get another month. You know exactly how much time happens between the moment he finds out till the moment he asks King Artaxerxes for help. In those several months, he's planning and thinking. If there were Starbucks back then, he'd have been at Starbucks every day, rolling out the map of Jerusalem, going, how much lumber am I going to need? And how much time am I going to need? Like, he's like an engineer, and he's planning this out. And then in chapter 2, when he gets his audience in front of the king says, man, what's up? He goes, I need to go back to Jerusalem. King says, cool, what do you need? He goes, here's what I need. He was ready, because he'd been thinking, he'd been thoughtful, and he had prepared his like one shot. And when he got it, he took it. Brilliant guy.
That's fascinating. I did not know that. You're gonna make me go back and read that book now. I want to check it out. That is really cool. Well, let me ask you this, just as we wrap up here. You know, what is the big audacious goal with this mission? What do you want to do with it? Like, if we were fast forward the tape 5-10 years from now, I know you don't like to think past a quarter, but if we did put business. Yeah, man, if we just think like Disney and what is possible, what are we looking at here?
I would love to see dads who understand that aside from being a husband, I do think your role as a husband, if you're married, if your role as a husband is a notch above your role as a dad. It's a bit more important for lots of reasons, but let's just say, if you're a dad, you have been given the coolest, most significant and influential job on planet Earth. Right after being your wife's husband. And I don't care what you do. I was with a guy the other day, Larry, and he was using this language, right? And the language was, oh, this guy's a big guy. This guy's a big guy. And what he meant was, this guy has a lot of influence. This guy has a lot of money. That's what he meant. But he kept using language that was like size related. Big people, little people, important people, unimportant people. He matters. He doesn't matter. And in Washington, D.C., and on Twitter, and at the Taylor Swift concert, sure, there's gates and things. You got to have the pass. I get influence. I understand it. However, fathers are the most influential members of every society that's ever existed in the dawn of human existence. And I could back it up if we just had enough time. And here's the deal. Dad, if you're a dad, congratulations. You are the most influential person on planet Earth. Now, go live like it. Go live like fatherhood really matters to you. Because I'm telling you, nobody has the influence over the next generation and over societies, communities, churches, nations, like the aggregate group of dads. And I would just love to see, whether it's guys like you and me working on the same elephant from different angles, I would love to see dads step into their role as dads, as importantly as they step into their role as their friggin' fantasy football management or getting their golf handicap down. Seriously, be a dad and take it seriously and love every minute of it, because you know what? Those kids are going to be gone before you know it.
I'm feeling you, man. I mean, you and I are not too far off in the same camp here, and I'm feeling that big time.
Absolutely.
Well, where can Kent, where can the guys find you, connect with you?
Well, before we dive off, I just want to say, bro, you've been doing great work for years. Thank you for the Dad Edge podcast. Thank you for what you've produced in books and resources and courses. If a guy's listening and you don't already know what all Larry does, go find out. Because, man, Dad Edge, you're like you're one of the white glove Ritz-Carlton type examples in the fatherhood space. Way to go, man. Keep up the great work. If you'd like to learn a bit more about what we do, 2 words, manhood, and then the word journey, manhoodjourney.org, manhoodjourney.org. See you there.
Manhood Journey. I even like the website. I just want to type that in. Makes me feel like kind of cool.
You tell your wife, you go, honey, I can't come up for dinner right now. I'm too busy going to manhoodjourney.org. You'll get points for that. Do it. I dare you.
She might actually believe me. Like, she really would. She'd be like, yeah, I'm sure you probably are.
Sure
But dude, this is great.
It's about time. That's what you'll hear back. It's
about time. I've been telling you about this website forever. Guys, not to worry. You won't have to go very far. Head on over to thedadedge.com/518 for the show. We'll have all of Kent's links in there, his books, website. Go check him out. This was a pleasure, man. I really, really enjoyed this. Gave a lot of fantastic, and I love the 4 tactics, by the way. And I really love that we kind of put a magnifying glass on the fear and the shame thing, because I definitely think that those are levers that are very, very apparent and chronic with us as men. So thank you for coming on, brother.
Hey, my pleasure. Larry, thanks for having me. Can't wait to talk to you again.
Back at you. Like I said, guys, head on over to thedadedge.com/518. We'll have everything in there for you. In the meantime, go out and live legendary. Take care.